Hi and welcome to the video. This morning I woke up at 4 a.m. to drive out here to take some pictures of the crested grebes and maybe some other waterfowl. Today is a quite nice day because it's basically, there is no clouds in the sky and I'm hoping for some nice backlit light with some action maybe from the grebes. It's a bit more windy than I was hoping for, but maybe you can see it in the background, the leaves are not moving a lot, so it should be quite fine. Unfortunately, it was raining quite a lot in the last days or even weeks, and I'm a bit afraid that many of the nests might have been lost due to this amount of water. Just when coming from the parking to here, I saw how high the water level was. I've really seen it never so high on this lake here. So yeah, fingers crossed that they still manage somehow. I will now go there and try to take some pictures and give you some tips along the way. So as you can see, I got very low here. I generally try to go as low as possible when I'm taking pictures of birds that are on the water. I just think it gives kind of a more intimate look to the image. And in this case, I really put the tripod more or less in the water and the camera just on top. And then I positioned myself in a way that I have the sun exactly opposite of me, so that I have nice orangey backlight situation here. And I also wanted to kind of try to anticipate that I have the birds somewhere where they are not stuck behind the reeds or in front of the reeds with this dark background, but rather in an area that is a bit more open, so that I can have the bright sky reflecting in the water, which gives this overall very bright image, with some blurry reeds in the background that are dark, and the bird is also dark, so the bird will just be as a silhouette. But for me that's fine, especially for the crested grebe with this crest that they have on the head. They're quite iconic and I think easy to recognize in the silhouette, and they just gives a nice image, a nice moody image. The good news is definitely that I saw several grebes passing by, collecting nesting materials and building the nest, so at least it looks like they're still trying. I hope that the first nest that got flooded, probably that there were no eggs in there yet. I'm not 100% sure, but it's pretty sure it's their second attempt because it's already a bit late in the season. But I hope they have more luck this time. And because they are building the nest, they are always swimming from the shore to where they built the nest in the reeds. And unfortunately, this is a bit far away. As you might have seen, I have a 400mm 2.8, and I could put my 2x extender that I have in my camera bag here in there. I could also crop, since this is a Sony A1 with 50 megapixels. But what I mean, I would like to be that the birds are actually closer to me, because then they would be bigger in the frame, while I still have a lot of the background with the nice colors in there, and the background would also get more smooth, more blurry, and I cannot achieve this by either cropping or using a tele extender. So the ducks were a bit more kind of cooperative. They came a bit closer. I hope you can see what I mean with I prefer if they're a bit closer and the background is blurrier. I generally prefer to use manual exposure in these situations. This means I sometimes need to adjust a bit if they swim through the image, but it just gives me the most flexibility. And what's nice on these Sony cameras is that I can use zebras. So it shows me exactly which areas of the image will be overexposed. And this is a great help with setting the exposure, as well as having 3 dedicated dials for ISO, shutter speed and aperture. Generally, I have the aperture wide open and a quite short shutter speed, because with direct backlight the amount of light is not going to be a problem. So I can easily dial in like a 4,000th of a second and still be around 100 to 200 ISO, which is definitely nice because sometimes there is a bit of action and I definitely want to freeze that. I want to just take pictures when the bird is in front of these nice bright areas, but still I need to start tracking it when it's still in front of the reeds where it's very dark, and with manual exposure this will be very hard to even find the bird in the viewfinder. So what I did here is I programmed one of my buttons that it toggles between exposure simulation on and off. If I turn it off, the image will always be bright in the viewfinder. I can easily find the bird, and if I put it back on, I can evaluate the exposure a bit more, and this is a very handy feature. So the problem with backlit is that usually you don't have a long time where the light is really nice. You have these amazing colors in the morning, and then 20-25 minutes later, at least for my taste, the light is already getting too harsh. You lose these nice colors, you get a lot of contrast. So what I did now is I walked around and I'm taking pictures from the other shoreline here so that I have the light in my back. But as you can maybe see, the background here is in the sun. I am not, and also the birds are mostly in the shadow. And this gives some nice conditions because this means the background will be bright and really very colorful, whereas the bird will still be in the shadow, and therefore there is no problem with the contrast. As you can maybe see, I'm not using my tripod anymore. I just put my lens here on a beanbag. It depends a bit what I do. If I take the tripod or the beanbag, how the shoreline is. Usually if it's flat, I prefer the beanbag. If it's more steep, I prefer the tripod, because I can actually put the tripod into the lake. This really depends, and it also depends a bit. Before I wanted to film a bit more, and for this the tripod is generally also better. Since I'm taking pictures of the birds in the shadow now and I want to show the feather details, it means that my ISO are going up. I'm still trying to keep a rather short shutter speed. It depends a bit on the situation, but I would say around 0.002 of a second or shorter, just because if there is some action and, for example, the grebe is catching a fish, or they are kind of showing some courtship behavior or whatever, I can still have a sharp image. At some point during the morning the light is getting a bit harsher where the grebes are, because the sun is rising higher and higher, which means at some point the grebes will be in direct sunlight, which is not something I really like. And even if they're still somehow in the shadow, the contrast or the difference of brightness between the grebe in the shadow and the background that is in the sun will get stronger and stronger during the morning. So I left and I walked around here a bit along the lake to see if I find some other birds, potentially songbirds that are somehow below the trees, that are completely in the shadow as I am right now, and then it would still be quite fine. For this I usually prefer to use a bit more focal length. So now, since I had the 400mm 2.8, I put the 2x extender in. If I would be walking around with my 600mm, I would probably put the 1.4 extender, and if I would have the 100 to 500mm from Canon, I would also put the 1.4 extender just to have a bit more reach. Speaking of equipment, what else did I take with me today? I mentioned I was mainly shooting with the Sony A1 and the 400mm 2.8, sometimes now with the 2x extender. I also brought along my R5 and the 100 to 300mm, just in case the birds would have been a bit closer, to include more of the environment. And this is something I can recommend, especially if you have a second camera body. Just put a shorter lens on the second one, have it ready next to you if you're lying there on the ground. It doesn't need to be the 100 to 300. In the past I did some stuff with the 70 to 200 or with the 100 to 500, just something a bit shorter than your long prime. Of course, if you have something like a 200 to 600mm zoom lens, you are well covered for basically all situations. I will finish my round here and then go back to the car, but I definitely want to come back because I still dream about the image of the grebe swimming around with the chick on the back. That's still a dream image I have in my mind, so I will come back. And if you want to support my channel, you can buy over the affiliate links of the products that I use below, or of course I would be happy if you buy my ebook that helps you to get better bird pictures.